All right. Well, welcome to another episode of the Rest and Recovery Podcast. With me is Dr. Dan Gartenberger. He's a sleep scientist, and I just messed up your name, didn't I?
Gartenberg. It's okay.
No ER. PhD in cognitive psychology, inventor, professor, biohacker, which is a newer term for me over the last year, and also a TED Talk resident. So very cool experience. And Dan, thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I do want to talk about first just TED Talk. Very cool experience, I'm sure. So tell me about just the experience piece about that for a minute.
So that was actually a unique program in New York City that I did, and TED got together basically a bunch of creators, and they ended this program, unfortunately. They have other programs like the TED Fellows, but
sure.
I had this passion in sleep, and I was doing this research with Penn State, and I gave this 6-minute lecture that ended up going viral with more than 4 million views.
Yeah.
About how we can potentially, and in the future, and I really believe this, we're going to be sleeping very differently in 20 years than we're sleeping now. It's a hard technology to create because so oftentimes tech does more harm than good when it comes to sleep. Right. And our lives in general. But I truly do believe that sleep is a gateway to heal our minds and our bodies and our souls.
100%. Yeah, I can relate to that on the negative side of seeing the consequence of that. But you mentioned the TED Talk and so what was that background? Like what's your Genesis 1-1, I'll call it, or origination story?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been working on this for, since I was a senior in college, which will date me. That was 2008.
Okay.
Back when the App Store just came out, and I was always an inventor basically. And from a family of people in the healthcare system, I saw how broken it was in a lot of ways. My dad was as an infectious disease doctor. My mom was and my grandma was a psychologist. So, I saw there were real problems, and besides breathing, sleep is the thing that we do the most, essentially.
Right. Yep.
And that thought always captivated me. We spend a third of our lives doing it. And then at that time, the iPhone was coming out, and I was part of the quantified self movement. I was actually I think you're in DC.
Yes.
I was I ran the quantified self for a while there.
Okay.
And that was like this group of people that, around that time, it was started by the editors of Wired magazine, Gary Wolf and Kevin Kelly.
Okay.
But it was just people talking about their data, trying to use this new wave of technology. Essentially, the Fitbit was the cool thing.
Yeah, it was first out of the gate, really.
Right. And there was a bunch of them then, some of them that, flopped. I've jawbone up, and I've tried a lot of them. The Nike one was kind of cool, actually. Anyway, so everyone was tracking themselves and doing these experiments. And I just see the trackers as a way, to continuously monitor your health. And then once we do that, there's various interventions to potentially improve your health. And we've been at this stage for a long time where it's just like things are just tracking you.
Yeah.
And they're not very active. It's more of like a passive experience, which can do more harm than good, actually, in some cases. And I can get into that.
Yeah. From in what capacity? Like from
like in sleep, there's something now called orthosomnia, where people fixate so much on some of their measures around their sleep. If you're an anxious person already, it can, I have a lot of, sometimes, we have like an AI chatbot in our sleep technology called SleepSpace. And I see this question all the time. People are like, they're like, my Oura Ring told me I got 20 minutes of deep sleep. Like, what's going on?
Right.
That's not, so the part of the problem is that's not 100% accurate. And I have some peer-reviewed publications that compare all the devices. Like in the journal Sleep, we compared Oura Ring, Apple Watch, and some clinical devices, polysomnography, of course. So you fixate on that. And if you're anxious already, it just pushes you over, and then you get more anxious, and then that can make your insomnia worse, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can attest to that as somebody, I don't know if I'm anxious, but I definitely got fixated when I first got it. And I literally had to take it off for a few days just because I was getting overwhelmed and caught myself to like, okay, I need to chill out. One day is not the end of the universe, nor does it make up everything. So it's like, okay, let's just relax.
And it is pretty healthy to have, I mean, you're still considered a healthy sleeper if you have, periodic insomnia. And that's really common. And, life stressors cause issues with sleeping periodically. And so sometimes people, if they're too type A, like the New Yorkers and the DCers, that can push you over, and then it does more harm than good, because now you're like fixating on this metric that isn't actually that important in the scheme of things. Yeah. It can be, but that's the problem of our generation, in my mind, is this lack of context to a lot of things. So, if I saw one bad night of sleep, I can't really make that the same analysis as if I saw you over the course of a year.
Sure.
And, saw that it was just a rare thing that happened. Maybe your dog died. Maybe, you had a stress, our environments can make us stress, and, we respond to that sometimes with a crummy night of sleep. How to respond to that, is always interesting, and it varies based on what's going on with you. So, to answer your question, what got me into this is, I'm an inventor. I'm trying to change the way that everyone sleeps, and if we can just improve it 2%, it would have a dramatic impact on our health and well-being. I ended up getting a PhD in cognitive psychology at George Mason University in their applied psychology program.
Okay.
Doing research for the Air Force and the Naval Research Labs, building AI that could predict fatigue to prevent pilots from crashing, essentially.
Oh, wow. That's critical business right there.
Yeah, the federal government cares about that stuff, and like trust and automation and stuff. But with eye tracking, actually. So anyway, and then a professor from Harvard, actually, as I mentioned the TED Talk, brought up this idea that you can play specific times at specific periods of sleep to entrain certain brain waves. And there was peer-reviewed publications backing this. This professor that I worked with at George Mason, Raja Parasurman, who unfortunately was this very famous professor, unfortunately passed away in my grad program. But he has like 30,000 publications or something, or citations or something crazy like that. But he was doing transcranial direct current stimulation, which is basically zapping your brain with electricity to try to get pilots to perform better. It was a similar process as what this other professor from Harvard, Dmitry Gerashenko, mentioned to me.
Okay.
Which was playing a sound instead of zapping your brain. So it's less invasive, basically. Sure. But your brain is just a bunch of electrical signals. So your auditory cortex picks it up, translates it, and you can prime different cognitive states with sounds and frequencies, which has been shown, widely. But this is sort of a new mechanism where it varies based on the stage of sleep that you're in. So we ran the study that I talk about in my TED Talk. Actually, when I gave that TED Talk, I hadn't run the study yet.
Okay. So it was the concept at the time.
Yeah, it was more conceptual at the time. So I have a peer-reviewed publication
Okay.
that my company SleepSpace released. That sums up. That's the conclusion to the TED Talk, actually.
Okay.
And I'd be happy to share it with you in your show notes or whatever.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
And it's like open access; anyone can see it. Is funded by the National Institute of Health or National Institute of Aging in particular. So we ended up getting these grants to run the study through something called the Small Business Investment Research, which is something the NIH does to support businesses that are trying to really help the public good. And what we're trying to do is if we can improve people's sleep, especially older people's, older individuals, we could potentially reduce conversion to Alzheimer's disease and related dementia, because there's a lot of growing evidence showing that sleep is crucial in cleansing out basically neural waste that forms through like beta amyloid plaques.
Is that like the glymphatic system?
Yeah, the whole glymphatic thing. There's some pretty good converging evidence showing sleep playing a cleansing role that reduces the likelihood that you're going to convert to dementia.
Right.
From both like fMRI studies, like some fly studies, and then experimental causal studies where you'll like systematically sleep deprive people and then measure changes in their brain. So we ran the study trying to figure out if we can play these sounds to enhance people's sleep. And we brought a bunch of people into a sleep lab at Penn State. We had a postdoc, Margot Shade Gray, who we collaborate with, who's actually a professor there now. She was a postdoc at the time. Stayed up all night and systematically played sounds to people based on their sleep stage.
Okay.
And what we were able to show is that we could increase these delta brain waves while she was looking at their EEG in real time, basically playing a sound right below the level of waking them up. Because sort of the tightrope walk in doing some of this stuff is if you stimulate too much, you can push someone into waking up.
Okay.
So we showed that we can increase these delta waves, but I wasn't totally convinced by the cognitive assessments we were doing. The data was just sort of mixed, and I could have cherry picked a publication, but it wouldn't have been right.
Yeah.
So then we ended up having to do this other experiment, and now we're recruiting 100 people with insomnia, doing blood draws and trying to show that not just this intervention, but a new form of therapy that we're calling SleepSpace cognitive behavioral therapy, where we're combining typical cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia interventions with this multimodal approach. And I invented this crazy thing that I patented the heck out of.
Okay.
It's a phone charger that slides under your bed and accurately measures your sleep through the vibrations of the mattress, which sits right here.
Okay.
And so you just put your phone in, and then that'll control light in the person's environment. So it'll turn everything red. We have like a wind down. We use these sounds to mask out noises and then actually wake you up in a lighter sleep stage, and then have all this, information, a 6-week program essentially on cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia that a coach or clinician, implements along with the patient. So we're not trying to replace the coach or clinician. We're trying to create tools to augment their practice basically and empower these people more, and enable anyone to see how effective a coach or clinician is essentially.
Yeah. And equip them with more prescriptive, like dialing in on the why.
So it's basically, you'll be able to set a sleep prescription to any of your clients, be like, you have your conversation with them. I do a lot of sleep coaching. I've done it on hundreds of people. And usually it'll end with try to go to bed at this time, try to wake up at this time instead of this other thing that you were doing. And that's very often one of the main interventions to cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. They'll actually constrain the time in bed oftentimes if someone has insomnia, to try to build up your homeostatic drive to sleep, such that you're spending more time in bed sleeping. It's a little bit counterintuitive. Like
shortening the actual time in bed, but hopefully improving the quality. Is that
exactly?
Okay.
So a lot of times people with insomnia start having this thought in their mind. By the way, I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a cognitive psychologist. Everything I say is not medical advice. Please
absolutely
see a doctor.
Yeah.
But oftentimes what doctors will suggest, people, they can't fall asleep in bed. And then they think to themselves, I got to spend 10 hours in bed or even more sometimes in order to get the amount because it takes me so long to fall asleep and I wake up so many times. But then they start associating the bed with this anxiety state. And it's, I see humans as association machines, and that's what a lot of my interventions are based around.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's something called stimulus control, where you start where you want to start building this association back between the bed and sleeping. And that's where the aphorism in sleep, save your bed for sleep and sex only, comes from. It's something related to stimulus control.
So, I mean, quick anecdote. I mean, it seems like in a lot of things too, is just having those healthy boundaries and knowing where those kind of demarcation points are.
Totally. Sorry if I'm talking too much.
No, you're
rambling on.
No, you're not. Not at all.
Okay.
You're the expert here.
Okay.
No, you're great.
Okay.
So continue on.
Oh yeah. So a big part of that is also your lights. So in training your circadian rhythm. And we actually at SleepSpace, we did some recent research with Google and this this smart bulb company, LifeX, where we tried to show that, we ran an experiment essentially, and we haven't published this yet, but we're working on it. That using the Google Smart Assistant at designated times to say, "Hey G, I'm going to bed." I'm not going to say the G word, or "Hey G," I don't want everyone's smart assistants to get activated.
Yeah, right.
Or "Hey G, wake me up at this time." And then based on that, we would have the lights shift over a 30-minute period from whatever they're at to off, or to gradually ramp up. And we actually showed in a really beautiful interaction, which is what an experiment psychologist really looks for. We compared a sham to our intervention with the lights. And we actually showed that this simple ritual, for healthy people even, this simple ritual of having a bedtime that you agree to, getting a notification at that time to say, "Hey G, do X, hey G, do Y." You're consenting, it's a suggestion, but then you're overriding it with your consent. You don't have to do it if you don't want to.
Sure.
And then, but it's still a reminder that, like, oh yeah, this is what my goal is. We lose track of time, and, it's just making us more conscientious of it.
Yeah.
And I think so often the thought of it is the treatment in and of itself. So we showed a positive effect of that, but we also showed that it's more than just that, that thought. It's also the lights, because in one condition we made it so the lights just blipped off, and that was our sham, instead of doing the full thing, basically. Okay. Yeah. So it seemed like the lights were doing something, but they weren't really. And we still got that when we made the lights do what we thought would be the most helpful, that had the best effect, basically.
Interesting. I like that, where you can actually leverage technology. I don't know if we were talking offline or at the beginning of this, where, technology can be the solution to a lot of things, but it's also been part of the challenge that got us here, to the point of lighting. Like even the invention of the light bulb, like not to deride it, but it turned into the always on society.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you could make and some research scientists do make this argument that the light bulb is one of the culprits to having an unregulated sleep, and that changed the way we sleep in a lot of ways. A recent researcher, I can't, there's some contention about how the device, what makes the devices bad.
Yeah.
A researcher that I work with, Anne-Marie Chang, published some stuff around how the blue light in particular is bad, which I think is true. There's a whole mechanism in your eyes, with photoreceptors in your eyes, that are specifically tuned to blue light, which, controls melatonin. And if you get that exposure, it's basically giving your body the wrong cue at the wrong time.
Yeah.
As it relates to the melatonin system. And
so would you classify it like I've even talked about it in other conversations that blue light is bad, but blue light's a natural occurring light from the sun. It's more of like an overdose of blue light. Is that a fair
Yeah.
statement?
So it's blue light is good if you're getting it in the middle of the day.
Right.
It's bad when you're getting it at 9 p.m.
Yeah.
when we evolved to be in total darkness at that time.
Yeah.
But then the other thing, another group of researchers, I'm sorry, I can't, I think Chuck Zeisler was on this paper. He was a famous researcher, showed that it's not really the blue light as much as, and I think it is the blue light in part, but this is probably an overriding factor. When you're on your phone in particular, it's like a dopaminergic activating experience. It's different than passively watching TV. On the phone, you're actively doing things, moving things around, going to that, seeing that, seeking novelty. And that experience, in particular with the phone, is partly what some people think is such a problem in this whole.
So like a higher level of engagement. So it's driving up, kind of upregulating more than just watching a TV.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I think that probably is the bigger effect. Like I feel my dopamine getting bumped up and me getting activated if I'm like death scrolling on Twitter or something.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I can perceptually experience. I feel that. Part of this thing is to try to put the phone in its right place. So it's by you at night, but it's like pointed away essentially.
Okay. So talk to me about the device. So you mentioned a couple different things related to it. I'm interested in the sound therapy element of it. And I think in your TED talk, if I remember correctly, you actually played the audible sound of it.
Yeah. So we're playing that sound at 0.8 hertz, which is every like 1.2 seconds. And it's just like a whoosh sound that we played during deep sleep. And your brain waves oscillate at around that frequency during deep sleep.
Okay.
And so that's the rationale for playing that while you're in deep sleep. With our free app on the store that you can try out, you can use the Apple Watch if you have an Apple Watch, and we'll give you an accurate measure of your deep sleep, and we'll actually play the sound when you're in the deep sleep phase. But we really need to know what stage of sleep you're in, because otherwise it can disrupt your sleep essentially.
Okay.
And so that's one aspect of sound. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so how does that happen? Is that where it's linked up with whatever tracker you're wearing?
Right now, we only have the algorithm working on an Apple Watch.
Okay.
Our next generation, we'll integrate with like Oura Ring and BioStrap too.
Yeah.
But our next version of the software, we can't do the deep sleep stimulation with that or the sleep staging. The next version of our software, we more seamlessly integrate with all of these different devices. We think of ourselves as like a sleep operating system where we're kind of sitting on top of all the devices. But to your question about the sound, it's not just playing the deep sleep stimulation sound. One of the biggest things is just having a sound machine.
So the white
that blocks
noise.
out noises. Yeah. And so if this is positioned next to you at night, we can actually play sound. A lot of the intellectual property I have is the fact that this is right by your head, essentially. So you can play sounds more locally. So the person on the right side of your bed, the bed hears, and the person on the left side of the bed doesn't.
Okay.
So that's one of the main
prescriptive,
reasons.
even for like married couples and whatnot.
Yeah, a lot of times a complaint is on the app store that I get is like with our pink noise, we have a dynamic sound mask to like block out frequencies and stuff. But some people are much more sensitive to noises at night than others. So sometimes a sleep partner wants it to be louder than my fiance, for example, likes it louder than I do, actually. There's actually part of our brains. There's a whole system that probably relates to this.
Okay.
How sensitive we are to these sounds, like sleep spindles and stuff like that. So anyway, this enables you to more locally direct the sound without having to wear like cumbersome devices, essentially.
Okay. So I'm curious on the sound, like obviously it's been tested. So it's at that same frequency. I think you said delta. Is that right? For the white noise. Do you think there's any like nature nurture element of this further around like babies and like in the womb and that kind of like natural circadian sound?
No, yeah, it's an astute observation. Like the sound is sort of in a similar like you can think about it as like a heartbeat in a way.
Yeah.
And maybe it's like similar as like the heartbeat that we experience in the womb. So it's sort of like
that's
that priming soothing. That.
Yeah.
And there's weird stuff about like being like swaddled and stuff, and like improving people's sleep, and you know that low vibration of like an airplane that sort of like knocks you out. Perceptually, I've experienced that. So maybe there's something to it. I think it's going to be hard to conclude that. But I think there could be something to that.
Yeah. I don't know how you would test that, like you said, but
that's the problem.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just trying to emulate the womb environment as much as, I mean, obviously, sleep in total darkness and keep a cool environment, and temperature, you know, is a pretty big thing we're interested in, and have it as quiet as possible. Those are some of the main ways to improve your sleep environment.
Yeah. So are you focused? So there's you hear the time frame of 7 to 9 hours of sleep. Is this quality versus quantity, or it's both and?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some people that I categorize as, you know, super healthy, like Dave Asprey type individuals who are like on top of it, exercising, you know, the right amount every day, eating the right things. You know, those people, and if you're not doing like a hard workout, for example, you know, sometimes those people might be able to sleep a little less, but generally when we think about it is sleep to effect. So like if your body is tired, you should sleep probably. And like there are some studies showing that if you sleep too much, it could lead to increased morbidity. I don't really buy that. Some of that stuff, I think that's more related to you sleep too much because it's a sign of when you're unhealthy, sometimes you need to sleep more. I mean, if you have an infection, for example, you need to sleep more.
Sure.
If you have chronic illness, I think you probably need to sleep more, and you should. So those studies are, I think, tapping into the fact that these people have a chronic illness, not necessarily that the sleeping more is doing any harm.
So it might be more of an indicator than a...
Yeah, it's like correlation, not causation, essentially.
Right.
But you know, as you mentioned, there's a consortium of medical experts and scientists that said adults need 7 to 9 hours on a regular basis. And that's true for like 99% of people, essentially.
Right.
So people that say that and then the other hard thing about this is there's your perceived sleep and then there's your actual sleep. And a lot of this is based on perceived sleep. But sometimes your actual sleep can be quite different. So like if you're an insomniac, you often underestimate how much you're sleeping. But if you're really healthy, sometimes you think you're sleeping more, but you're actually maybe you have these little awakenings that you're not even aware of.
Right.
If you wake up for like 5 minutes, you're usually not aware of it at all. If you wake up for less than 5 minutes,
there is wakefulness in the cycle. That's natural.
Yeah, it's normal to pop awake in the cycle. Actually, a lot of the algorithms don't capture that, but it's totally normal. And we actually have more granular data on our SleepSpace Apple Watch algorithm, where we'll tell you if you woke up every 30 seconds. But it's normal to wake up like for 30 seconds between a sleep cycle.
Yeah.
Technically.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, 7 to 9 hours perceptually is for most people seems about right. That's a lot of variability, obviously, and every person probably does have their own basic sleep need. But I would also bring up, it even varies from night to night within an individual. One of my examples being if you're sick, another one being if you have like a big workout, sometimes you need a little more.
Yeah.
So it's just something to be like cognizant of, and really, to figure out what your sleep need is. Just try to go on like a relaxing vacation, go to bed at the same time and wake every day without any of when you don't have any external pressure to wake up early or anything.
Sure.
Try to go to bed at the same time every day. And you should just fall into a rhythm. And that amount is probably how much sleep you need. That's one way to figure it out. There's other more complicated ways.
So you're telling me I need to go take a vacation.
Yeah, take a vacation. A lot of us need to, or we're all like hibernated from COVID and everything.
Yeah.
So anyway, and that's another thing with all this is like with COVID, it's really hindered people's circadian rhythms, and it's hurt their sleep with the anxiety, obviously, and stuff too, and the stress.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's really a good time to focus on sleep.
100%. Yeah. I mean, and that's maybe the cognitive element of sleep deprivation or lack thereof, and the impact it has on the body, leading to other issues like depression and things of that nature.
Yeah. So thanks for bringing that out. Yeah. So what I was trying to say before is there's a ton of research that sleep deprivation is bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's causal, and it's, long-term not sleeping enough, which is probably around 40% of Americans. We are an underslept society. And I really believe that that's partly why we can be so cranky and,
it'd be interesting to do a study on regionalization, because if you think about, like, you're in New York City, I'm from Jersey. The Northeast seems to be just inherently more intense, and you know what I mean? And like,
well, I think Colorado is known as the best at sleeping.
Okay. Different kind of Rocky Mountain High, I guess.
Yeah, right. And I mean, it's a combination of things, right? They're also in nature. It's beautiful. New York has the competitive aspect of it, obviously, with the city that never sleeps.
Yep. Same with similar with DC with all the type A's.
Similar, sure.
Kind of the hub of the universe.
Yeah, from a political perspective. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
There is some work on that by state, for sure. They've looked at stuff like that.
Have they? Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be a curious overlay to see. Obviously, there's other things that probably relate as well, but nature nurture aspect of it.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it really is nurture, and you can train yourself to shift your circadian rhythm, for example.
Okay.
We were talking about that earlier on the call. Like, I used to be more of a night owl, and with shifts in sunlight and, when I'm active and regularity, I've shifted. Now I'm basically a morning lark. Some people are more shiftable than others. Some people are hardcore night owls, and their genes just like don't let them do otherwise.
Yeah.
Same with the morning larks. And then there's other people that are more flexible. But I'm probably in the pretty flexible. I'm slightly shifted to being a night owl. So a lot of this is what I call metacognition, which is your awareness of your cognitive, of like your body's needs and your cognitive state. And that so often is one of the main predictors in psychology for outcomes.
Okay.
A good example of this is like schizophrenia is so bad, and sometimes mania, or because the person doesn't know that they're having an episode, for example. Whereas like if you're depressed, you kind of know it. So having this awareness of like, what's my baseline sleep need? Mine is really around 7.5 hours, and it'll shift around that.
That's about what I am as well. I seem to feel like the best around 7.5, 7:45.
I probably really need like 8, but I'm in like a slightly more stress activated state right now because of like startup things. And like, I'm aware, this is like the metacognition, like say I'm about writing and everyone's different with this stuff, but like, I'm just going to speak from my own personal experience. In like academia, you have these like grant deadlines, and then, it's like you have to submit like 100-page report and it has a due date.
Right.
And so for something, when that happens, a lot of times I'll sort of activate into a manic state because I'm like working a lot. Late at night and all this stuff. And I'll be aware that I'm pushing myself into that mode. And when I'm in that sort of more manic state, and I don't have, bipolar or anything, but my environment can push me into this hypervigilant state.
Right.
I know I'll need to sleep less actually during that time. Or I won't need to sleep less, but my body will respond by not wanting to sleep as much.
Interesting.
And then, once I submit the grant, I'll catch up on the sleep and then come down out of it and stuff like that.
So do you have hedges, like personal practices that you use during those times that like either just, it is what it is and like understand that's the season you're in, or do you have any kind of things or habits that you try to do?
Well, I mean, I try to keep the bedtime and wake time as consistent as possible.
Yeah.
And then if I am really inconsistent, I'll be careful sometimes. Say I didn't sleep enough. Sometimes I'll take a nap because it won't throw me off. Other times, if like I slept in really late, I won't take a nap because then I know that I'll have problems sleeping later. And there's things like that on the weekends too, when I used to go out more, like for example, Friday should technically be your later night than Saturday.
Okay.
So you have like the Saturday and Sunday time to adjust for the work week, for example.
Okay.
Little hacks like that. Sure.
Yeah. Well, and I think it boils down to, like you said, knowing yourself a little bit and understanding how the different environmentals, the catalysts, whatever you want to call it, impact you and your sleep.
Exactly. And like, for example, like alcohol, I know will destroy my sleep.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean I'm going to never do it.
You just understand that's the condition and the byproduct, and you're willing to take that risk for a moment.
Right. Exactly. And
yeah, exactly. A bourbon or a beer or whatever your personal flavor is.
Yeah. And I almost never get intoxicated anymore, but a glass won't. Usually it's only bad if I drink more than a glass And then if I do like more than 3, then it's like a real issue for the sleep quality. Yeah. Almost anyone who tracks will observe what happens to their sleep.
Yeah. So I wanted the impact on, you mentioned cognitive psychology, and, we're talking about sleep and the mental state around how that affects emotions, but like sleep and empathy, which seems to be like one I hear it talked a lot about with various business leaders that I follow, like someone like Gary Vaynerchuk, who talks about it like all the time. But then it's like, it's a key human emotion to be able to empathize with another individual.
No, and like teamwork and stuff. And this is what we have like a corporate wellness program where we give our software to everyone for a year.
Okay.
And we try to show people that we can improve their sleep. And there's a lot of evidence showing that it'll reduce absenteeism, reduce accidents. That's the main thing I studied, and one of the main things I studied in my PhD program. I think it's like, it counts for hundreds of billions of dollars in accidents every year.
Wow.
Sleep deprivation. You got mainly like driving, truck drivers, and but like, even I think 3 Mile Island had I think that happened really late at night and stuff. So I think there was a fatigue component to a lot of these major accidents.
Yeah. What was it? The Exxon Valdez, I think, was also something like that. The old back in, I don't even remember when that was, but I'm
like
sure it was a sleep deprivation issue.
Yeah. A lot of them have that as one of the factors. Usually there's models. There's the string cheese model or something where it's like factors stacked up against one another is usually what causes an accident. But so anyway, I really believe that if you sleep better, you're going to work better as a team. You're going to manage your team better. You're not going to be so reactive. You're going to lead. I think you're more likely to lead from a place of calm and, not being an asshole boss, essentially.
Right.
So I really believe that.
What's that?
I really believe that. And then it'll reduce turnover and absenteeism and all this stuff. Yeah.
Just the compounding effect seems huge, and kind of relates to your earlier point on like with insomnia and shortening, you go short to go long.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I've heard in other venues, slow down to go fast.
Yeah. Similar.
Same similar concept.
And just so you know, usually just to finish the thought on the short to long, usually what they'll do is they'll go short for the bedtime, maybe over, and there's restriction and compression, which is more extreme or less extreme. And then they'll gradually extend the bedtime once it's compressed. So it's exactly like what you're saying. It goes short and then you get good quality, and then they'll extend it out to get longer again.
Yeah. Very cool. So, what have we not touched on the device so far, and how it can like personalize?
Yeah, so the big thing is, what I do in my sleep ritual, and this is what we're testing in our experiment, similar to the Google thing that we tested, is we'll have a wind down ritual that the app primes, and it'll play like ocean waves 10 minutes before my designated bedtime.
Okay.
And it'll turn all my lights red. Because I have these smart lights set up, and then at my designated bedtime, the lights will turn off. And then at the designated wake up time that I set, the lights will gradually ramp up, as a smart wake. And so I think that process of the smart home environment that like understands you is the future. And once we are able to detect the sleep in real time, we're going to open up our platform and connect with all these devices and try to control sound, light, and temperature. That's what I think about in real time during sleep in order to enhance sleep. And basically this thing is just like a tool to non-invasively measure people's sleep, because basically like 50% of people don't even want to wear one of these things while they sleep.
Well, I was going to say too, that's probably the greatest barrier to entry for folks, is just picking whatever band or watch or ring or whatever and put it on themselves, and it's just another thing to put on. And
then also, if you try a different one, you lose all your data and all this stuff. So we like to think it's like one algorithm to rule them all.
Yeah.
We're going to take all these data. You will have a dashboard where you'll be able to see it all. I can compare my BioStrap with the SleepSpace Apple Watch algorithm, and I'm doing that right now seamlessly. So it's really easy for anyone. I'm a crazy biohacker. I'm tracking with 3 things right now.
Yeah.
Actually 4, but just for anybody who, uses an Apple Watch and then maybe they switch to Fitbit, we'll have one platform where you'll be able to see all that information.
That's great to get that historical data, kind of to your point on the trending and things.
Oh, totally. So the new version of our system, you'll download it and you'll instantly get feedback from your Oura Ring, basically, because we'll be able to look back in time.
That's pretty cool to see the trending, and especially as more and more people get these devices and go through their lifespan and seeing the different trends over like the individual in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s.
And this is, people identify, my dad basically identified a major health issue in himself by tracking his platelet counts over time. When you have that historical data over a long period of time, you can see the trends.
Yeah.
And I think it's only the beginning with these wearables, because pretty soon everyone's going to have this thing implanted in their body.
Yeah, that's where it starts to get right now, certainly, for sure, in my mind anyway. It gets kind of weird where it's the implanting. I don't know about that one. That is a line to me.
It's going to start probably with certain people that need it for another reason.
And I guess if you think about it, my personal opinion is no. I'll go with the wearables, but you're not putting something in. But you do that now with cardio-based stuff, right? With the pacemaker.
No, yes, that's what I mean with a pacemaker. Imagine you get a pacemaker, and it gives you all this amazing health information too.
Right.
So there's some reasons why you need something to be inserted into your body.
Sure.
I agree that I probably wouldn't do that, but I'm saying in like 20 years,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. It'll be interesting to see how all this evolves and can impact lives for the positive.
I feel that.
Well, Dan, great conversation, man. I'm really fascinated by a lot of the tech and what you're doing with other ways to kind of look at this information and use it from a holistic standpoint to help the individual. And ultimately, that's the goal of the podcast is really to educate and equip folks with information so they can live this one life well. And it's like there's so many things at our fingertips now, and it's only going to get better.
Totally.
So I like to close things out with a couple personal questions. 3. What are you reading right now?
I'm reading this great book, Short History of Nearly Everything. It's are you familiar with it?
No, it's a funny title.
It's a what is it? Oh, Bill Bryson book. He's a pretty famous author. It's like about scientific how we discover different scientific fields and history of science, sort of.
Okay, cool. So what are you listening to right now, be it music or podcast?
We started listening to the Huberman Lab Podcast.
Yeah. Andrew Huberman?
Yeah, it's really, I think he's really smart and has good integrity.
Yeah.
And then what have I been listening to? Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. All right. Might be kind of obvious, but what is your go-to rest and recovery method?
So my go-to rest and recovery method is obviously to use my SleepSpace system. If I'm particularly activated, I'll set the stage with a red huge sleep environment. Maybe take a bath. That's like my trick to like stimulate myself out of the anxiety somehow. Yeah. And like fluctuating the body temperature is a pretty good way to do that.
Okay.
maybe and read a book usually while I'm in the bath.
Yeah.
And then do my wind down ritual. Sometimes I'll do 10 minutes of just equal breathing in and out, and then get a good night, 8 hours in.
Cool. Awesome. Well, Dan, thanks again for your time and expertise, and look forward to seeing where you take SleepSpace.
Awesome. Appreciate you taking the time to interview me.